Hey everyone, it's Alexander Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and happy Friday the 13th, or maybe not, considering how unlucky the day is. Anyway, we are on the verge of the Halloween season. Halloween Horror Nights has kicked off in both Hollywood and Orlando, and while I do have my annual horror reviews planned for next month, why don't I go ahead and rank the Friday the 13th series? I reviewed all the movies 4 years ago except for the original. The last movie that we got was the 2009 remake 15 years ago, and this year is the 40th anniversary of the first time Jason died. So yeah, let's go ahead and do this. This video will be me ranking the Friday the 13th franchise from the worst to the best. It's kind of funny when you think about it. Just 2 days ago, I reviewed one of the single greatest movies ever made, and now I am going on to rank one of the trashiest film franchises ever. You can't say I don't have any range on this channel. Anyway, here's some caveats before we get into the actual ranking. Most of these movies are pretty bad, so the way I'm going to be ranking these is more on an entertainment level. I mean, I will talk about how well made the movies are, I guess, in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, but more or less it's how entertained I am, how memorable the movie is, how good the kills are, and simply on a basis of whether or not I would be willing to rewatch these movies. So that's how I'm going to be ranking all 12 of these movies. And if you like this and you want to see more videos like this from me, you can go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and make sure to hit that bell button to get a notification when I release a new video. So with that being said, let's get started with this ranking. Number 12. Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. And boy did this new beginning not last long, because Part 4 they killed Jason, so in this one they decided to do a copycat killer, but they completely fooled the audience into thinking that Jason is back. So it's just basically the same movie that we got 4 times over, except it's just not very engaging. Some of the kills are just kind of meh, with the exception of the belt around the tree kill. That's pretty brutal. The nudity is just very gratuitous. Like, there are points where the camera just stays on all these naked women, and it gets to a point where it's just very trashy, like more trashy than the other films in this franchise. The only good thing I have to say about this movie is that the tree kill is pretty incredible. The idea of somebody tightening a belt around your head and just crushing it is pretty amazing. As long as you forget the fact that Roy the paramedic in one shot is tightening the belt one way, and then the next shot he's tightening it the other way. So just ignore that. But other than that, this is usually the epitome of the very worst aspects of this franchise, and that's saying a lot considering how bad these movies can be. Number 11. Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Now, when I first heard about these movies, not having watched them, this always seemed like the most engaging one of the series because, oh, Jason is in New York City, so that seems like it differentiates itself from the other films. And then I watched it and went, oh, this is awful. First of all, the movie barely takes place in Manhattan. There's an hour of the movie where it's just spent on a boat. And even then, when they get to Manhattan, it's dirty alleyways, and they shot it in Vancouver with only one noteworthy scene taking place in the actual Big Apple, and that's when Jason is in Times Square. Another thing that sucks about this movie is that the kills are very neutered. They were butchered by the MPAA, much like the ones in 7 were, and then all the characters are just mediocre as hell. Some of them are flat out terrible, and what they attempt to do with the final girl to try to give her a connection to Jason further breaks the continuity of this very broken timeline, outside the fact that, you know, there's a ad for Tim Burton's Batman, even though this movie supposedly takes place in 2001. So there's a lot going on in this movie where they just didn't care at all. There are 2 good things about the movie, if I'm going to be honest. The first is that kill on the rooftop where Jason uppercuts the guy's head off and it rolls into a trash can. That is awesome. The other is when Jason is walking through Times Square and he just kicks a radio out of the way, pissing off a bunch of punks who try to beat him up. He flips his mask up to show his face, and then the punks are like, yo man, it's cool, then they just book ass out of there. So that was fun, but other than that, this is undoubtedly one of the worst movies of the franchise. It's the single worst Jason movie. Number 10. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. Oh, this one is nearly as bad as Jason Takes Manhattan. It tries to do the same thing that Part 5 did, but this time making Jason more of a supernatural being who possesses people's bodies. They try to dump a whole bunch of lore on us, and it feels like it just came out of nowhere, which I guess theoretically could explain how Jason came back from the last movie, but even then, it's so preposterous, it's so stupid, and it's just completely asinine. But the thing that makes this better than the 8th movie is that the kills this time around are pretty incredible. There's some really gory sequences. There's one kill in the unrated version where Jason stabs a naked woman with a pole of some kind, shoves the pole up and basically rips her in half. So that's pretty incredible. The opening of the movie is the best aspect of it, where Jason is being lured into a trap by the FBI. They gun him down, they call in an airstrike, and they just blow him to smithereens. Like, that would have been a great way to end the movie. Like, if you look at this as a short film, it begins with the woman in the cabin and ends with Jason being blown up. It is the best Friday the 13th short film ever made. And then the end of the movie, where Freddy Krueger's glove comes out of the earth and drags Jason's mask to hell. That was pretty cool. A cool setup for, admittedly, one of the better movies of the franchise. Where? You'll have to wait and see. Number 9. Friday the 13th Part 3. This is the first movie that's significant for being the first one where we see Jason in his mask for the first time, because he wasn't in Part 1, he was in Part 2 but had a potato sack, and then in this one he finally gets his hockey mask. And there are other aspects to enjoy about it, like the ridiculous 3D effects that really don't play well in 2D, but you could just laugh at them in the same way you laugh at the 3D in Jaws 3D. There's some over-the-top acting that's ridiculous. There's some cool kills here and there. But other than that, it's just a carbon copy of the last 2 movies. And in my opinion, it just gets so boring after so long. And none of the characters are even interesting. Okay, maybe interesting is the wrong word, because that really doesn't apply for any of the characters in these movies. They're not memorable in the same way they were in the last 2 movies. So for me, this one is definitely bottom of the barrel. It was the first one to give us Jason with the hockey mask, but that's really all that it accomplishes. That's good. Number 8. The original Friday the 13th. This is one of those instances where the first movie in a franchise is not the best one, and there's a lot of reasons why this isn't one of the better movies. For one, the movie tries to play out like a murder mystery, where you have this unseen killer going around killing camp counselors, but there's no real setup, we don't get any hints of who it is, and then at the end of the movie, when they bring in the character of Mrs. Voorhees out of nowhere, and then reveal to the audience that she's the killer, it doesn't have the same effect like finding out that Norman Bates was actually the killer all along in Psycho, and that he and Mother are the same person. It just doesn't work. The acting is also pretty atrocious from, I think, everyone except Betsy Palmer. I mean, Kevin Bacon is okay, but we all know he went off to have a much better career after this. And then the one thing about the movie that really kills it for me, the thing that pisses me off the most, is when they actually kill a real snake on camera. And apparently that snake was the pet of the person who loaned the production that snake. So it's just so unsettling to watch that. I know this movie costs like nothing to make, but it's just a pointless scene. It's a scene that didn't need to happen, and the result of it was a dead snake, like a real dead snake. Yes, there is the Kevin Bacon murder. Yes, this movie did spawn an entire franchise and a bunch of other slasher movies that would rip it off, despite it being a rip-off of Halloween. But even then, it's just not a good movie at the end of the day. It's better for what it started, not for what it actually is. Number 7. Friday the 13th Part 2. Now, this is basically the same movie as the last one. A bunch of camp counselors go to a cabin before the kids come in and are killed off by an unknown killer. Except this time, it's actually revealed to be Jason Voorhees. And there are several other moments in the movie that work for me better than the first one. For one, the final girl of this movie is much better than Alice was in the first film. I think she has more charisma, she's more likable, and she's smarter than Alice. Some of the other characters in the movie are pretty likable, especially that kid in the wheelchair. And then his death is just absolutely hilarious, where he gets stabbed with the back of the machete and then rolls backwards down an infinite amount of steps, and it's just hilarious. But at the same time, that's kind of a problem with the franchise as a whole, is that sometimes it's trying to be super serious and scary, but then has ridiculous moments like wheelchair kill down the stairs. That you don't know if it's supposed to be played for laughs, so the tones kind of conflict with each other. And even though the ending of this movie is a massive cop-out in the same way the first one was, I just found this one to be more enjoyable. It's mediocre, it's not good, but I like it better than the original. Number 6. Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Oh yeah, that didn't happen. 40 years later, and Jason's still made movies. This one is sometimes regarded as one of the better Friday the 13th movies. Not for me, because once again, it's doing the exact same thing that the last 3 movies were, right down to hiding Jason throughout a lot of this movie. I'm like, guys, he has the mask on. We know who Jason Voorhees is at this point. We don't need to have you hide him the entire time or have him kill in shadows. So that's one of the ultimate things that really brings this movie down, is that it just once again does the exact same things that the previous movies did. But that being said, this one is the best of the first 4 movies, mainly because the kills are better. I mean, you got Tom Savini coming back to do the makeup and effects work, so that's a plus. It introduces us to the character of Tommy Jarvis. Some of the characters are a little more likable than before. The actor playing Jason in this movie, Ted White, does a really good job. He brings a lot of physical presence to this human version of Jason. But at the same time, it's still littered with some boring moments. Like I said, hiding Jason throughout a lot of this movie when we know what he looks like is just stupid. There's some hilarious scenes that are supposed to be scary, but end up being unintentionally funny. Like the naked girl on the raft who makes that ridiculous face when she's getting stabbed. And then, of course, there's, oh God, he's killing me, he's killing me, he's killing me. That got a huge laugh out of me when I saw this movie for the first time. It's just okay. I mean, the middle 4 movies that I'm ranking are the most mediocre of the franchise. And this one is definitely more in the upper tier, but is not one that I'd be willing to rewatch over and over. Number 5. Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. This movie is another middle-of-the-road entry for me. I mean, it does something significant in the fact that it introduces us to Kane Hodder, who is the best actor to play Jason, and the one who played him more than once. His physical performance and his presence alone make this movie what it is. The ending of the movie, where he's facing off against Tina and her psychic powers, is pretty great, but at the same time, it still suffers from a lot of the other issues that the other movies had. Some moments that are supposed to be scary but come across as funny, the kills that are completely neutered by the MPAA, the lackluster characters that are just so boring and dull, except for Tina because she has those psychic powers and that automatically makes her cool, and Melissa, who's basically the stereotypical bitch character. But again, it's another middle-of-the-road entry, and the way it ends with Tina's dad coming out from the water, dragging Jason underneath, and then it just abruptly ends after that, is stupid. It is ridiculous, which is why this is placed where it is. Number 4. The 2009 remake of Friday the 13th. Now we're at the point of this ranking where I come to the movies that I'd be willing to rewatch the most. And the 2009 Friday the 13th movie is something that I didn't appreciate it when I first saw it, but over time and having rewatched it again 4 years ago, I've grown to really respect. Remake is kind of the wrong word for this film. It basically takes elements from the first 4 movies, puts them into a blender, attempts to make it scary, and thus we get the 2009 remake of this movie. And in terms of being scary, it actually succeeds. This Jason is not lumbering, he's not teleporting all over the place. Well, kind of, but he's actually intimidating. He's more tactical with his kills, he's more brutal. He has several attempts to lure his victims out. He is an intimidating character, and it's the only time where I actually saw Jason and got scared. Not to mention he's played by Derek Mears, who played Kick Puncher in Community, so that's cool. The kills are pretty good, but they're not super memorable. They're not among my top favorite kills of the franchise. The characters are kind of weak, and I think the movie is just as gratuitous as Part 5 was with the nudity, but it has the most gratuitous sex scene I've ever seen in a mainstream horror movie. And it got to the point where it was just straight up pornographic. You could have easily done without that scene just because it goes on for so long and it's so gratuitous. But regardless of that, for a movie that I didn't really care for when I first saw it, I've grown to appreciate it over the years, especially now that I've seen all of the movies. And to be honest, this movie and the number 3 movie kept swapping places for which one I like over the other. Speaking of which, number 3. Jason X. Now, I'm not going to apologize for putting this movie as high as I do on this ranking video, because I know it's terrible, I know it's garbage, I know it looks incredibly cheap, but god damn it, it's a lot of fun. Like, for me, this is kind of what the best Friday the 13th movies offer. Like, a tone where they know it's ridiculous, they know the type of movie that they're making. I mean, it's Jason in space, so at this point, you have no choice but to just be ridiculous and goofy with it, and I think this movie succeeds on that account. I found myself really enjoying the actors, not so much the characters, but the actors seem like they're having a lot of fun and are well aware of the type of movie they're making. It's got some of the very best kills of the franchise, especially that Sub-Zero kill where Jason smashes a woman's face on a counter. It perfected the sleeping bag kill from Part 7. This movie is just absolutely bonkers. It's absurd, it's not good, and I will continue to admit it's not a good movie. But in terms of rewatchability, it's why I rank this movie far higher than most people would. Number 2. Freddy vs. Jason. One of the main reasons why this is ranked higher for me than Jason X is because it actually looks like a real movie, and the sets look real. It doesn't look at all cheap the way Jason X tends to. And plus, it's actually a pretty cool setup to get Freddy and Jason to fight together. It works within the continuity of both franchises. It feels just like a Friday the 13th movie as it does a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. The kills are pretty spectacular, especially that douchebag boyfriend Taco. That's an amazing kill. The fight scenes between both Freddy and Jason are entertaining, and I love how both of them are on each of their turfs. The first one takes place in Jason's dream, where Freddy's more powerful, and the other takes place in Crystal Lake, where Jason is more powerful. It's also incredibly bloody. Unlike the first Alien vs. Predator, this movie does not skimp out on the gore, and unlike Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, it doesn't feel like unsettling to watch. It feels cool and over the top. But there's also a lot that's wrong with this movie. The characters are very one note, they're not interesting, the acting's pretty terrible. There are points in this movie where they kind of forget about the rules set in the previous Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And that weird slow motion where it looks like the movie's skipping frames is obnoxious. Like, that's the one thing about the movie that I truly hate above everything else. But for what it is, having two of the most iconic slashers facing off against each other, it's a lot of fun. Number 1. Jason Lives, Friday the 13th Part 6. Now, this is the only movie in the franchise that I would legitimately call good, because after 5 movies prior where it keeps doing the same thing over and over again, it's trying to be scary, but then it has some silly moments that clash with the horror elements, this movie just goes, screw it, we're going to be a horror comedy, we're going to be a meta film as well, we're going to resurrect Jason Voorhees with a bolt of lightning and give us zombie Jason, which is the Jason you think of when you think of Jason, and we're going to just have fun with it. It's also the cleanest of the Friday the 13th movies, for better and for worse. For better because, unlike Part 5, it's not gratuitous with its nudity and sex. In fact, there is not a shred of nudity in this movie, and the sex scene that you see in this film is one of the worst sex scenes you've ever seen in a mainstream movie. Like, it is flat out hilarious. Now, the reason this is one of the cleaner movies for worse is that the kills aren't all that impressive. They were once again neutered by the MPAA, but this time around, I think the kills are saved because there's some clever gags that go along with them. Like when the caretaker gets killed, he has an empty bottle, and he goes, "Oh, you're gonna be the death of me, but what a way to go." He throws it behind him, Jason catches it, breaks the bottle in half, and then stabs the guy with it. There's the misogynistic douchebag with the machete that Jason hurls into a tree, and then he's so powerful that he still has the guy's arm, and Jason looks at it like, "Oh, okay, I didn't expect to have that." So even though the kills were neutered in this movie, there are some clever sight gags that save them. You have a likable protagonist with Tommy Jarvis. The final girl of this movie is not only cute, but also takes a lot of initiative to help Tommy Jarvis take out Jason Voorhees. It just results in the most fun Friday the 13th movie out there. It's the one that I can legitimately tell people that, yeah, if you're not into these movies, this is the one to watch because it's a lot of fun, it has some clever sight gags, it's a horror comedy more or less, and it's basically the perfect embodiment of what Friday the 13th is, for all the good reasons. You've got zombie Jason, he's wearing his mask, the kills are good, and the characters aren't complete scumbags, and it's just a really, really fun movie. This is the one that I would happily rewatch over and over again. In fact, I try to make it a tradition to watch it every Halloween because it's one of my favorite Halloween movies and TV shows to watch this time of the year. So with that said, Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, is my favorite of the Friday the 13th movies. And there you go, that's my ranking of all 12 Friday the 13th movies. When will we see another one? I don't know, but I hope they get those legal rights settled because literally the next movie would be the 13th entry. And the fact that it's taken us this long to get a new movie when it's going to be the 13th one is ridiculous. So I would love to see a new Friday the 13th movie in the future now that I've officially become a fan of these movies. And I'm hoping for the best whenever that day comes. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being subscribed to the channel if you are. And I want to give a special thank you to my YouTube members right over here. If you want to help support the channel even more, you can do so via YouTube memberships for as little as $1.99 a month. Not only do you get early access to all of my videos a day before they come out, but you get exclusive content that no one else gets to see, including my top 5 favorite series here on YouTube. So I hope you guys consider joining as a YouTube member of this channel, and until next time, I want to hear your guys' ranking of the Friday the 13th series. Whatever it may be, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. If you want to follow me elsewhere on the internet, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, Threads, and my theme park and travel channel right here on YouTube. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.